Welcome to Reddit's Storyline. Have you ever helped someone in your family, genuinely gone out of your way to make their life easier, only for them to turn around and act like you owe them something in return? Not just a favor, not just a thank you, but actual money, as if your kindness somehow created a debt that you now have to repay. Because today's story is exactly that kind of situation, and it slowly spirals from a simple misunderstanding into something that starts to tear a family apart. And the real question is, should she have just given in to keep the peace, or was she right to stand her ground? Emily is 28 years old, and like many nurses in the United States, she works as a travel nurse, which means her life has been a constant cycle of temporary contracts, new hospitals, unfamiliar teams, and adapting quickly to completely different environments every few months. It's not an easy lifestyle, but over the years she's learned how to navigate it well, especially when it comes to working with recruiters and agencies that place nurses into these contracts. Now, one thing that's pretty common in that world is referral bonuses, and if you've never heard of those before, the concept is actually very simple. If you refer another nurse to your agency, and that person completes a certain amount of time on their contract, usually around 8 weeks, you receive a bonus as a reward for bringing them in. In Emily's case, that bonus was $750. And importantly, the person being referred doesn't lose out either, because they also receive a smaller bonus, around $250, just for completing the contract. So from a normal perspective, it's a win-win situation where everybody benefits and no one is losing anything. At least, that's how it's supposed to work. A few months earlier, Emily decided to help out her brother-in-law, Jason, who is 30 years old and also works as a nurse, although he lives on the East Coast while Emily and her husband are based on the West Coast. Jason had been struggling to find consistent travel contracts, and since Emily had recently had a really positive experience with her recruiter, she thought it would be a good opportunity to connect him with someone reliable. There was no hidden agenda behind it, no expectation of anything in return, just a simple decision to help a family member who could benefit from the connection. So she referred him. Everything went smoothly from there. Jason got accepted, started working, and settled into his contract without any major issues. And for a while, everything seemed completely normal. But then, little by little, something started to change. At first, it was subtle enough that Emily didn't think much of it. Jason would make small comments during conversations with her husband, saying things like, "Hey, make sure you send me that bonus when it comes in," or joking about how they should split the money. The strange part was that he seemed to believe Emily's husband was the one receiving the bonus, not her, and instead of correcting him directly, Emily chose to stay out of it and let her husband handle the situation. She assumed it would pass, that once he understood how things worked, he would drop it. But he didn't. As the weeks went by and the 8-week mark approached, those casual comments started to feel less like jokes and more like expectations. There was a tone behind them that wasn't entirely playful anymore, something that hinted at entitlement rather than gratitude. And then, the moment the bonus officially went through, everything escalated. Jason received his $250 bonus, which confirmed to him that the process had been completed, and instead of just being happy about the extra money he had received, he became fixated on the idea that he deserved Emily's bonus as well. This time, he didn't go through her husband. He went directly to her. The messages were no longer light-hearted or joking. They were direct, persistent, and increasingly aggressive. He told her that he was the one doing the actual work, that he was the one completing the contract, and that it was unfair for her to receive more money than him when, in his mind, she hadn't done anything. At that point, Emily finally responded. She explained the situation as clearly as she could, keeping her tone calm and factual, telling him that the bonus wasn't about who worked the contract, but about who brought value to the company by referring a new nurse. If she hadn't referred him, he wouldn't have gotten that job, and he wouldn't have received any bonus at all, even the smaller one. From her perspective, the system was straightforward, and she hadn't taken anything from him. If anything, she had helped him gain something he wouldn't have had otherwise. But no matter how she explained it, Jason refused to accept it. He kept insisting that it wasn't fair, repeating the same argument over and over again, as if saying it enough times would somehow make it true. Eventually, Emily realized that the conversation wasn't going anywhere. There was no mutual understanding, no willingness to see the situation from her perspective, and no sign that he was going to let it go, so she stopped replying. She thought that by disengaging, the situation would naturally cool down, that without a response, he would eventually move on. But instead, things took an even worse turn. The next day, Jason shifted his focus back to her husband, but this time with a level of hostility that hadn't been there before. He began sending messages filled with insults, calling Emily toxic, entitled, and selfish, and even went as far as suggesting that her husband should leave her because of how she was handling the situation. At that point, it was no longer about the money. It had become something much bigger, something personal, something that was starting to damage relationships within the family. Her husband defended her, of course, but the tension had already taken hold. Communication broke down. And just like that, what started as a simple act of helping someone find a job had turned into a conflict that neither of them had anticipated. Now Emily finds herself in a difficult position, questioning whether standing her ground was worth the fallout that followed. On one hand, she knows that the money was rightfully hers, that she didn't do anything wrong, and that giving in would essentially mean rewarding someone for pressuring and insulting her. But on the other hand, she can't ignore the fact that this situation has created a rift in the family, and she wonders if things would have been easier if she had just let it go. So the question becomes, at what point does keeping the peace stop being the right thing to do? And at what point does giving in simply encourage more behavior like this in the future? What do you think? Was Emily justified in refusing to give him the money, or should she have sacrificed that principle to avoid the conflict entirely? This is one of those situations where there isn't just a financial decision, but an emotional one, because sometimes the real cost isn't the money itself, but what happens to the relationships around it. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on this one. Would you have stood your ground like Emily did, or would you have given in just to keep things from escalating? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed deep, real-life stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, because there are plenty more coming.